Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. This is your host, Mr. Gabriel Flores. Today, I am here with Jeff Greenfield with Provo Analytics. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, Prova Analytics or Provalytics, whichever way works for you, Gabriel, is great with me.
I'm actually pretty excited about this one, folks, because again, I feel like our market, the world we're living in, is starting to get a little bit into AI-driven technologies and services and things that really are going to help businesses continue to succeed, not only from like a sales and marketing perspective, but also just from like a general survivorship perspective, right, in the world of entrepreneurship. But before we get into all that, Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself. Who is Jeff Greenfield?
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm Jeff Greenfield. I'm the founder and CEO of Provalytics, an AI-driven attribution platform. We essentially solve this old problem that marketers have had for years, which is half the money I spend on marketing is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half. And it's
Man,
it,
that's so true.
It totally is. And it comes down to something that marketers are not really good at, math. We're not, marketers, when you think of a marketer, marketers are creative people. They're great with design and creativity, but math is something that they tended to shy away from. And the truth is that things have gotten so complicated with all the different places that you can put your dollars. This is not something that can be solved with a calculator and a spreadsheet. This requires something more advanced, and it's primarily just because of all the changes that have happened in technology and in the advertising industry, really over the last 20 to 30 years. It's pretty substantial. But really, the problem has always plagued marketers. It's always been there.
It's interesting. I feel like the last, couple of years, there's just been so many new mediums that have been introduced where marketing, advertisement, and communication now live, right? From the new social media sites that kind of pop up every day to blog posts, newsletters, to even the just general news, radio, and it just keeps how do individuals like someone that's in marketing, how do we stand out? How do we basically stand out from all the static?
Yeah, it's really tough. It used to be before there was the internet, we had in terms of like places if you were a brand where you could put your marketing dollars, it was obviously television was number one. Then there was radio, billboards, direct mail, and then newspapers. And that was it. And the way you stood out is if you had something, if you were blessed enough to get something positive said about your business, like on the local news, and if it went national on the wire, the AP wire, that was like a big deal. That was like a big thing for companies. And now the issue is that people don't go to their news anymore just at one place. They get most of their news from social media. So it used to be that, the news was the news every night. Now news is 24/7. But depending upon the demographic you're going after, people get news from different places. So if someone's like over the age of, let's say, 40 in the US, chances are most of their news comes from Facebook and Instagram. If they're in their 20s, it's probably TikTok or Snapchat. So you kind of have to now think about, who am I selling to? Who's my potential customer? And your messages have to live there. And for some very large brands, they have to be everywhere because they're selling to everyone. And so it really complicates things, and you really have to start thinking about it. And so that's in terms of getting the message out there. Where it gets difficult is trying to figure out, well, which message worked best under which medium. And that's where the math kind of comes in.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit because to your point, traditional marketing and media is kind of it's been turned on its head a bit, right? In trying to identify where the market segments live, and then what is the message that they find valuable enough to kind of retain their attention, which it's very limited these days, right? So with that said, let's talk about, because you mentioned the Snapchat and you mentioned TikTok. Those two kind of platforms are very non-click, right? It's very scroll based versus the YouTube and Facebook era where it's very like click here, learn more.
Right.
How do marketers, how do we begin to measure this whole new non-click digital channel world? How do we measure our success? Because you mentioned, how do we determine which one? Well, how do we measure it if there's no clicks?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because most of marketing today is really fixated on this concept of a click. And this really started when you think about the birth of marketing, the birth of digital marketing, that is, in the mid 2000, marketers really gravitated towards it because all of a sudden I had something I could buy. And at the end of the month, I would have a report that said I spent X amount of dollars and I got X amount of clicks. You contrast that with, hey, I spent X amount of dollars on TV and what did I get? Nothing that I can actually demonstrate and show. So marketers are like, wow, this is great because the closer to the sale that I get, and a click is kind of a step along the way towards someone buying or showing interest, the more I can prove that it's actually working. And that's the whole basis of all of kind of internet advertising. Everyone thinks about how much am I spending per click, my cost per click, and all of these things. But that bypasses one of the most important aspects of marketing, because when you think about marketing, you're as a company, you're investing dollars, and you're investing those dollars because you're buying what we call eyeballs, people. You're trying to get attention, just like you said, Gabriel. And in marketing speak, that attention is called impressions. So anytime someone is exposed and sees an ad, that's an ad impression. So you're actually buying ad impressions. And the job of those ad impressions is to build awareness for your job, for your company, that is. And that awareness builds over time. And when awareness is at a high enough a level, then that leads to people walking into your store. And if your store happens to be online, in most cases it is, that will translate into clicks. So clicks are much further down the trail. And so, but now we have these new channels, which are like connected television, CTV. It's digitized TV. Somebody sees a TV ad on Amazon Prime, there's nothing to click on, but there are those eyeballs, those ad impressions. And what ends up happening is several days, several weeks later, all of a sudden the marketer sees, my God, we got tons more clicks. Well, where are they coming from? Well, they're just showing up. Well, because they're coming up because of the awareness that was built from that Amazon Prime ad. So going back to your original question, how do we measure those? Well, really, we have to kind of go back to, what did we do before they were clicks? What did we do before digital? Well, we used a statistical modeling technique called marketing mix modeling, also known as media mix modeling, where we used a bunch of regression analysis to look at what was the contribution of these ads that we did in market and these impressions to our sales. And so that technique has been around. In fact, most of the large brands that are here that have been around since the 80s, they were all built using this technique. Uh, but that technique is not as agile, it's not as fast as what most digital marketers like to see. Most digital marketers like to see stuff in real time. But the way we're able to handle those no-click digital channels is we take the math from the past and we merge it with more advanced techniques so that we can get the answers. So we can actually see that relationship between those eyeballs or those ad impressions and those clicks and then the eventual sales. So we use the past. It's like Back to the Future. That's what we've done, Back to the Future, Gabriel.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, you're taking me back to the past with this conversation, thinking of the marketing, with back to the Portland State, graduate days here and here going to college. And folks, in fact, LinkedIn, you mentioned impressions. LinkedIn is one of those kind of social media sites where it always kind of lets you know how many views and how many impressions, right? And how do we think? In fact, folks, please, I'd love to connect with you. Go visit me on LinkedIn, Mr. Gabriel Flores. But now with that, how do they? Like, how does it define? I understand a click, right? You click on something, but how do our impressions, how is that actually quantified?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because just as you mentioned it on LinkedIn, you can see how many impressions there are on like a video or a post you put up. This is the strangest thing, Gabriel, is that every marketer out there who's running a campaign, they have a Google sheet on their desktop right now. And in that Google sheet is every day that they've spent money on advertising, every day is listed, how many clicks they got, how many leads, how many sales, whatever the numbers were. And when they downloaded that data from Meta and from Google or from TikTok and all of those things, there was a column called, we could call it eyeballs, but it's actually called impressions. So it is a quantifiable number. It is there, but most marketers ignore it because they've been trained to ignore it because there is no impressions column in Google Analytics. So they just assume it's not important. Now, marketers like myself with gray hair that have been around since before the internet, we know about these things like GRPs and TRPs. We've been around since before there was a click. We understand how marketing actually functions. So we don't ignore those things. So those impressions are there. They're actually all validated. And for most of these platforms, not only are they validated, but these numbers are actually audited by the Media Ratings Council, which is a council that was set up by the US government many years ago to get rid of fraud. And so these are real numbers, just like the clicks are real numbers, but most marketers today ignore them. So they're there. They just have to pull them out of the reports.
You know what? You mentioned Google Analytics, and I feel like at the end of the day, um, we're kind of talking about the marketing piece, and you kind of have to go back to the future, right? And I feel like the Google Analytics, at the end of the day, analytics is kind of the basics. You kind of have to know the general analytics. You have to know what your analytics mean, how are they trending, why are they trending that way, and whether direction they're going, either forward, backwards, or just stagnant, right? Now, with that said, how do we analyze our Facebook and Google ads to perform more efficiently?
Well, the way we do it is, and this goes along perfectly with what we've been talking about, because most of the time, the way that folks will handle and manage their campaigns is they look at a relationship between how many clicks they're getting and how many sales they're getting, or how many leads, whatever their conversion or what we also call a KPI is. And they manage it that way. And if things are new and things are hot, and then things are trending great, and they say, okay, we ran this ad, let's spend more. Our cost per sale is still going to be the same. But then they get this to this point where all of a sudden, gosh, the cost per sale keeps going up. It's going in the wrong direction because they've reached the point of kind of saturation with that creative and with that channel. The problem is that they're looking at a metric that's too far down the funnel, because there's not a great relationship between clicks and sales. They need to go more up funnel.
Yep.
And what I recommend is to look at those impressions. I feel like I'm like a broken record here, but that's the reality. Now, where the issue comes in is that folks will notice that they have a lot of impressions on one day and they don't get too many clicks and they don't get too many sales. And they have to understand that when you are building awareness, there's a lag time between awareness and action. There's that old kind of marketing acronym, AIDA: awareness, interest, desire, and action. So when you're building awareness at the top of the funnel, it's going to take a little while for those clicks and those sales to come in. But the key for marketers, the best way to manage is if you were to take your last year's worth of clicks for Facebook on a daily basis, your sales, and then also your impressions on a daily basis, and you were to create a graph of your impressions to your clicks, you'll notice that when your impressions start to go up, and maybe a couple of days later, you'll see a big surge in clicks. So you want to understand that time to conversion, or that time to action, is incredibly important. Once you understand that, then you know, okay, when I launch a campaign, it's going to take like 11 days for things to really sink in. And so that's an important metric for a market to understand. But the best way to manage these campaigns, focus on what you're actually buying, which are impressions.
Yeah, Jeff, this conversation is awesome, and I really, folks, I hope you guys are like taking notes, because Jeff is basically giving you basically a 4-year marketing crash course in 30 minutes or 40 minutes, however much time we have today. And one thing you mentioned is KPI, so key performance indicators, folks. Now, go subscribe to the Shades of Entrepreneurship. Go check out theshadesofE.com. Make sure you subscribe, because I talk about the importance of KPIs. I talk about the refer and provider funnel. So I work in healthcare, Jeff. So when you're talking about the sales funnel, so first you're talking about our own attributes, right? The desire versus action. So what Jeff is talking about, folks, is when we think, individuals, ourselves as the consumer, and we're thinking about purchasing something, we actually go through our own funnel of kind of, okay, now we have like some awareness. Now we actually have a desire to purchase it. And then before we actually purchase it, right? So there's a funnel. Now there's also a marketing funnel that coexists with that. And what Jeff is really talking about, and this is where my world lives in healthcare. It's at that top of that funnel, the awareness to evaluation, to conversion, to loyalty. right? So in my role, I'm essentially trying to get out into the community, build relationships with other, independent private providers, right? Because I work for an academic medical center. And so that first level is awareness. I needed to make them aware of what our services are, create a value proposition for it, right? But I also need to have key performance indicators to determine, are my tactics working or not? Okay. So first you have to start out with the goal. What's your goal? Okay. My goal is to make them aware of whatever it is I'm selling. Okay. How do you plan to do that? Those are going to be your tactics. Okay. How do you plan to measure those tactics? Those are your key performance indicators. So you have to need them all. And basically, what you're starting to do is as you go through your tactics, you can begin to determine, you know what, this tactic isn't working because it's not actually helping my key performance indicator, or this tactic is really working very well. And you have to be able to adjust that very quickly. And then what Jeff was saying, previously in the marketing world, when they would take that time and the kind of, here's our media marketing, here's our television marketing, and then they wait for a year or a quarter, right, whatever their frequency was, and then they'd analyze that information and like, holy crap, news is the paper ads are doing great and the TV's doing horrible, but it's 6 months later, or a year later, who knows what could have happened by then. We have individuals that now live in a time where they found a DVD player that's now extinct. They found a Blu-ray player. Well, that's now extinct. They found the mini disc player. Well, that is now extinct. Then laser disc player. Well, that is also now extinct. It's like things are changing very rapidly. So even in today's time, 6 months, like you were mentioning, Jeff, the digital marketers, they like the real-time analytics, right? But you kind of have to still understand the basics of what you're doing and how you're trying to get there, and make sure you have measurable goals to actually achieve that. Because if you're just going out there, and I call it the shotgun approach, and you basically you spit out a shotgun and you go visit every single hole where the shotgun and see which made the biggest impact, that's a waste of time, waste of energy, and a lot of wasted money. Right. And so if you're able to really narrow down your marketing funnel and your sales funnel, and which tactic at each level you need to be employing from a marketing perspective or a sales perspective at that level. And then what you also want to understand is, when does that individual change from that awareness to the conversion, right? To a purchase, to loyalty. So you also have to begin to change your understanding. So when you see a consumer start to go down that funnel, you now know when to switch from awareness marketing to purchase marketing. Hey, no longer aware. Now it's the click here button. Here, buy now kind of thing, right? And so that's what really Jeff's explaining, because it really is just all in really kind of messing with our psyche. Really, right?
No,
Yeah.
you're totally right on there, Gabriel. 100%. These funnels are what drive all of this behavior, and it's important as marketers to understand what are the different components of those, and then also what is the messaging that goes along at the different stages of the funnel. You can't go in and ask for the sale when someone first becomes aware. It's now, are there certain products you can do that with? Yeah, like, the ads you see on TV where it shows a product, it solves an immediate problem that you're having, and there's only 10 left, and you have to call this number right now. Those types of products are designed for that. Most things, the funnel requires a little bit more to it.
Yep, I agree. In fact, one thing, it was interesting. I was talking to one of our providers this weekend, and folks, I love like analyt or analogies. I love analogies. I always throw out analogies. And so one of the things I told him, because again, you have to build a trust in a relationship or create some type of value add in order for you can get that consumer in, right? And so one of the things I said to him was like, we cannot trade a dairy cow for a dozen eggs when we need the chicken, but we show up to get the chicken with the bull. And essentially what I mean is, if we want a dairy cow to feed us forever and we're going to trade it for egg, we actually need a chicken so we can get fed forever as well. Okay. You can't trade, but you can't go in there like a bull in a china shop into a meeting expecting to get the chicken, you know? So you kind of have to play the value proposition game when you go into meetings, when you go into any type of building, any type of relationship. What is the value add? And that's your marketing piece. That's what you actually market and you communicate and you really make sure it's out there in the market, is your value proposition. Why do they need this sweater or this jacket or that piece of gum or whatever it is that you're selling, whatever service or product, right? Why do they need that? And why can't they live without it? You know, like the iPhone. When the iPhone, the iPod first came out, simple ad, just a picture of the iPod, and it said 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's it. That was their value proposition. They were going to give you 1,000 songs in your pocket. Man, that was the greatest marketing ad. Got milk. Milk actually, possibly one of the, I don't think there's actually really any health benefits to milk, but goddamn, that was a great marketing plan. Like, got everybody now knows the got milk sign. Now, Jeff, I'd be very interested. Share a bit of your background. How did you become interested in marketing and analytics? And then how, in particular, how did you create this company?
Yeah, great question, because I'm a marketer at heart, and which means I'm not a numbers guy. So to me, marketing is kind of sexy. Marketing analytics doesn't seem very sexy. So I kind of got into this kind of a little bit out of the way. It definitely was not a linear path. So probably by like my third career or so, I was buying media for some clients, and we ran into this issue where it turned out that for every sale, we had like 5 or 6 partners, digital marketing partners, that were claiming credit for each sale. So this is right around the beginning of digital marketing, 2006, 2007. And this is this duplication issue. The same thing happens to marketers still today. If you have 100 sales a day and you're buying on Google and on Facebook, and you add up all your reports, it will say you had more than 100 sales. Very likely it'll say you maybe had like 180 sales. So there's always an issue, this duplication issue, because Facebook doesn't know about Google and vice versa. So I had to create a system to solve that. There was no system in place. And I had a team of engineers that were working on another issue for us. So I took a couple engineers off and started building it out. And each week there were more issues that started coming up. This was for one of the larger weight loss clients in the US. We kept running into these other issues about who was going to get credit for the sale. Ended up building out what became a company called C3 Metrics, which was one of the first enterprise multi-touch attribution companies in the US. We took care of clients, everyone from JP Morgan to US Bank, a lot of financial and a lot of pharmaceutical companies as well, some of the largest advertisers in the US. That was a lot of math, but I hired folks to take care of the math for me. But that came about to solve a problem for a specific client whose marketing I was managing. And then that morphed into, hey, it turned out other people had this problem, and built that company up, scaled it up to about 75 employees. And I exited there in 2019, right before the pandemic, after 12 years thinking I'm done. I'm not going back to measurement. And then one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that all of a sudden privacy became like this number one issue across most of the internet. There's been all of these changes. They started with this thing in the EU called the GDPR, and now we have all these privacy laws all across the US. So what that meant is the techniques that my original company used to do that, they were the standards, but now the standards were changing. So what I had built before was no longer going to work, because that methodology only worked if we could collect 100% of the data. And now today's world, it's not about, you can't get everything. And so we needed to, this is where we go back to the future again. We went a little more math heavy and statistical heavy to get to that same answer. And so that's why I started Provalytics, because there was an opportunity to come back in, help some of the same clients I had helped before, but also create a solution for the industry that was really suffering because of all these privacy changes that were going on. So that's what kind of got me back into it. I saw an opportunity to come back into a market I know really well.
It's just really fascinating that, you know, there's always innovation happening, even when you feel like you kind of like, I've learned everything in this market. I can't learn anything else. And then all of a sudden the pandemic happens, right? And
Yeah.
everything gets flipped on its head. What makes Prova Analytics unique, and how have you been utilizing the AI platform to really kind of, make it easier and streamline a lot of these processes for these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so what makes Provalytics unique is that we're not taking in user level data. So before, the only way to figure out what was working and what wasn't working is you would have to start at that user level and collect billions upon billions of data points every single day. And then that data would get aggregated up to a daily total across everything. And then you would use that for analysis. Well, we can't track people across the web anymore. People don't like it. And there's laws against that. So now we're not starting at that user level. We're starting at the daily level. So we only get daily aggregated data. And we're able to still connect the dots because the math is so much more sophisticated. The cycles on the computers are running so much faster now than they were even 3 or 4 years ago. That's what's incredible about it. So we're actually able to get to the same answers that we're able to get to before, but without violating anyone's privacy whatsoever. Now, the way we use AI in our process is that when most people think of AI, you think of ChatGPT and you think about giving ChatGPT information and then getting back a very sophisticated type answer. What we did is we trained an AI bot because there's processes throughout our modeling where something has to stop, and a human being, when we were developing this, had to look at the numbers, do some analysis, and then decide, okay, which step comes next? Is it B, C, D, or E? Are we ready? Or are we ready to go on to F at this point? And so what we did is we trained bots to be able to do that analysis. So now our process can run without any human intervention whatsoever. Data goes in, data comes out, human doesn't touch it, and it doesn't have to go to a chat GPT or anything like that. It all stays internal to our system.
And that's see, I really like that process because I think truly the there's always errors. There's always room for error when it's the end user kind of pushing their data forward, right? I know I always have errors when I'm pushing my data through, and so it's really nice to kind of have that piece a little bit removed, right? So I don't have to worry about it a little bit much. Now, who would you say is your target audience? So you folks listening right now, what is your value proposition? Give us your pitch.
So our target audience, we're still primarily focused on larger advertisers, advertisers and brands that are spending $10 million or more per year. And our biggest value proposition to them has to do with this privacy issue. There was a new research study that just came out that just because, and there's been a lot of privacy changes, but the biggest one for a lot of marketers was an iOS update that was done a couple of years ago,
Yep,
where
that
you
killed me.
now yeah, that app, it shows
Yeah,
up and it asks you, do you want to allow this app to track you? And of course, everybody says no. So
everybody.
that,
I say no.
yeah, that cost marketers that were doing hyper targeting, which is the way most marketers are in the digital world, that was a 37% revenue drop. Very, very significant for them. So we're able to bypass all of that because we're not dealing at that user level. That's number one. The second biggest thing for marketers that they're facing today is that consumers today are what we call omni-channel. So we get messages from all different places, and I shop in all different places. So let me give you an example. Let's say there's a brand out there and they're advertising on TV. I see them in an Amazon Prime ad and they tell me, go to my website. Let's say it's a sock brand. Go to my website. Well, I'm an Amazon customer. I buy my stuff from Amazon. I'm going to buy on Amazon. Well, guess what? There's a whole separate team for that brand that buys Amazon ads. And I happen to be on Amazon and I see an ad for another brand on there and I say, oh, and they're telling me buy on Amazon. And I say, I wonder if they have a website. This has happened to all of us. We go to a place that they're not telling us to go to, but the awareness has been built up from us and we go where we want to buy. That's causing marketers a huge issue. And it's this concept of halo. So the TV ads are driving people not to where you want them to go, but to where they want to buy. And your ads on Amazon and your ads on Walmart are driving people back to your regular website. So trying to figure that out and trying for the CMO to figure out where to actually spend dollars is near to impossible right now because there's so many different places. The third biggest issue right now that these marketers are dealing with is what's called a single source of truth. They have their Google Analytics that their finance uses, that their team uses, and then all of the different marketing agencies that they're working with, they're all living inside of like Facebook and Google. So there's like 15 or 20 different sources of truth. And the problem is that if I'm a CMO and I want to get more budget, I need to be able to justify it in my numbers. And things have become so complicated, it's near to impossible to get a single source of truth across an entire organization, across all of these different marketplaces that you can get everybody on board with. So we come in and build out that single source of truth so that they can get buy-in across all of their vendors and then eventually their CFO so they can go in and get more budget to scale the brand. Those are the big offerings that we provide these brands these days.
Man, and folks, again, if you want to get in contact with Jeff, I'm very much like Jeff. It's kind of funny. I feel like you explained me to a T. I'm definitely the individual that sometimes goes to Amazon. I find a business, and I'm like, you know what? Jeff has enough money. Jeff Bezos has enough money. I'm going to go to the small business over here. I'm going to go to their website, and they tend to also have free shipping, right? I think people are like, well, Amazon Prime, I got free shipping. Well, if you go to their websites, a lot of the times these companies, $30, $50. In fact, if you go to the shadesofE.com right now and you purchase one of our apparel items, you will get free shipping if any purchase over $50. So again, we have these abilities to do. And I really, it is interesting because it becomes very difficult to target the right person and where they're at. And because there are so many different medians. Now with that said, folks, test them out, see which one works for you. Because like Jeff said at the beginning of this conversation, some of these individuals, some of these markets are going to be the Facebook, right? Depending on your age group, right? 40 over, probably Facebook. 40 under, probably that Facebook or the TikTok, Snapchat era. Instagram is kind of a little bit in the middle. And then YouTube is very interesting too, because I would say, the podcast certainly gets a lot of traction from that area. However, at the end of the day, folks, people don't go to like YouTube and Facebook technically to find you. They go to Google. At the end of the day, whatever you're doing, 90% of the time, somebody's going to go to Google and they're going to put in some keywords. So that's kind of getting into SEO, which folks, you jump into that another day. But, utilizing search engine optimization is really important, making sure that you have really good keywords as well, and making sure that, people are able to find you so you become like the number one of the search and so on and so forth. So, but again, there's a lot that goes into this marketing world. In fact, I would highly recommend for those folks, again, that over the $10 million budget from the marketing. I know a lot of folks that have been on this show are at that point. Please reach out to Jeff and his team. Pro Analytics, really cool stuff. They're going to help you really try to understand who your market is and how do you target them best, right? So you're not, so we're not doing the shotgun approach anymore. We're not going to visit every single location that we did a market and see what had the largest impact. Now, Jeff, before we leave, what advice specifically, what should individuals start doing today and stop doing today for the marketing?
I would say I'll start with the second. Stop focusing on clicks because that's not what your metric should be. Start focusing on impressions. And what I would say for my recommendation is that Google Sheet that's sitting on your desktop, go there right now, add right next to the date column, a column, call it impressions, and go back over the last year and add up the impressions every day for the last year and start creating some graphs and start looking at the relationship between your sales, your clicks, and your impressions. And don't forget, you're buying impressions. That's what your focus should be.
Yeah. And folks, if you find some company that you're interested, like the Shades of Entrepreneurship podcast, a quick like or a share on the social media sites goes a long way in helping us attract more impressions, getting a larger audience. As Jeff mentioned, it's kind of the halo effect, right? And so by all means, please feel free. Now, Jeff, for folks that are interested and want to learn more about you, maybe they want to connect with you. Where's your website? How can they learn more about Jeff?
Yeah, they can go to provolytics.com and if they want to connect with me, I love chatting with other entrepreneurs wherever they're at in their journey. Just find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. Hit me up. I'd love to chat with folks anytime.
Perfect. Jeff, again, thank you so much. Pro Analytics. Jeff, this was an awesome conversation. It's really fun to kind of get into it and really heard about the marketing funnel. And I'm telling you, I kind of took a step back in time a little bit with school. I was like, oh man, this is, again, folks, I really hope you guys like jotting down a lot of these notes, because I really feel like Jeff just kind of took you through a 4-year marketing degree in about 45 minutes. So make sure you really jot down some of this information. Go check out Pro Analytics. I'll have this information on the Shades of Entrepreneurship website, so you can check it out, theshadesofE.com. Make sure you subscribe. We'll have Jeff's information, contact information. I know I'm going to be connected with Jeff on LinkedIn here shortly. And then I also want to give a big shout out to Jen and her team over at the podcast team over there that continue to send me phenomenal guests like Jeff onto the show. I really do appreciate what they're doing. And Jeff, I appreciate what you're doing. In fact, I might connect with you offline, because I have a group that they essentially, it's a collab here in the Portland area. And it's, some of our larger companies that go to that. And they essentially best, knowledge shared, what are your best practices? How are you attracting, customer? What is your CTA? What are all these analytics and acronyms, and how do I measure them? And so sometimes they do some education and some networking things. And if it might have an opportunity for you to share some of your insight and possibly educate some of the folks here locally, and who knows, maybe you find a client or two at the same time. But we'll definitely chat more about that as those come up. Again, folks, please go ahead and subscribe to the Shades of Entrepreneurship website by visiting theshadesofE.com. You can also see us on the social sites at the Shades of E on almost every channel, except I don't dance on TikTok much, so I apologize. But other than that, check out the YouTube. This video will be available on theshadesofE.com, including the transcriptions, link back to Jeff's account. So please make sure you go and check that out. Again, everybody, thank you and have a great night.